The hospital at night had an atmosphere completely different from that of the day. The clatter of meal carts and the murmur of conversations in the hallways were gone, replaced by silence broken only by the steady rhythm of nurses' footsteps and the beeping of heart monitors. Nellie Harrison hurried down the corridor, her low heels tapping a rushed beat against the cold, polished tiles. In her hand was a small bag filled with personal items for her grandmother, a shawl, a tin of peppermint candy she loved, and a magazine. The long day at work had left her eyes sore and heavy, but just the thought of Grandma Elisa, the woman who had raised her since childhood, gave Nellie strength. Earlier that afternoon, her grandmother had fallen, spraining her wrist and bumping her head. The doctor said it wasn't dangerous, but because of her age, they decided to keep her overnight for observation. The moment Nellie heard the news, she shut down her office computer and rushed straight to the hospital. The receptionist had given her the room number, 507. But now, under the dim yellow lights in the hallway, the numbers on the doors seemed blurred. While thinking about buying pink carnations, the flowers her grandmother loved most. For tomorrow, Nellie stopped in front of a door that was slightly ajar. She didn't notice the number, 570. Smiling, she thought, she must be asleep already. I'll surprise her. She gently pushed the door open. The room was dark, curtains almost completely drawn, the hallway light spilling in just enough to reveal a still figure lying in bed. Nellie's heart softened. Slowly, filled with affection, she leaned down and placed a tender kiss on the person's forehead. But the moment her lips touched, a pair of deep brown eyes flew open. "Ah! Ah!" Two screams shattered the silence. Nellie jumped back, heart pounding wildly. The person in the bed shot upright, eyes sharp and cold. One hand braced on the white sheets. It wasn't her grandmother. Not at all. It was a young man, his face chiseled, hair tousled, fresh wounds still visible, yet carrying an aura so powerful and distant, it seemed unreal. "Who are you?" His voice was hoarse, low, laced with something that made the air tighten with tension. Nellie froze for a second, then burst into a nervous laugh at her own ridiculous mistake. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" I walked into the wrong room. I thought, this was where my grandmother was. His brows furrowed, the corner of his mouth curving into a smile, half mocking, half weary. "Do I look that much like your grandmother?" "No, of course not." Nellie raised her hands, eyes full of sincerity, her awkward smile lighting up her face. "I was just in a hurry and mixed up the numbers." She turned to leave, but his deep voice came from behind. "Stay!" Nellie stopped, her shoulders trembling slightly. She turned back and met those brown eyes again. No longer cold, but shadowed with a strange emptiness. Leaning back against the pillow, he spoke softly but firmly. "You're the only one who's come in here, without wanting something from me." Nellie blinked in surprise. The cryptic words sent her heart spinning. Who was this man in a hospital bed? A young man with a face both proud and weary, eyes both distant and silently pleading. She bit her lip, hesitated for a moment, then smiled gently, guided by her instinct to comfort others. "I really did walk into the wrong room. But if you're feeling lonely, I can stay for a little while." In the stillness, only the steady beeping of the heart monitor remained. And that was the moment when destiny began. When a girl with a warm heart stepped into the cold, secret world of a stranger, without knowing he was one of the most powerful millionaires in the city. The room sank back into silence. Outside in the hallway, the squeak of a medicine cart and the distant voices of doctors faded away. Nellie sat there, hands clasped together, feeling the man's gaze on her as if it were searching straight through her. Evan Cole. The name echoed in her mind again. She had definitely heard it somewhere before, but now it stirred nothing more than a vague sense of familiarity. He tilted his head slightly, staring out the window. The sky was pale gray, the afternoon edging toward dusk. "It may sound strange," Evan said, his voice low and steady, "but over the past month, a lot of people have walked through that door." Nellie blinked. "Then you're not really alone, are you?" He gave a faint smile, fragile as glass. "Loneliness isn't about the number of people around the bed. It's about the fact that none of them truly want to stay." Nellie said nothing. Evan went on, his tone measured. Every morning, an assistant comes with reports. They stand exactly 10 minutes, read the numbers, ask a couple of questions, and leave. In the afternoons, a few executives stop by with flowers. However, every bouquet features the company logo, which is used for photos to be sent to the press. Clients, partners, they come in just to say the same empty line. Get well soon. He paused, exhaling slowly. Even my father. The only time he showed up was to ask when I'd be back in the boardroom. Nellie frowned slightly. She was used to the image of her grandmother surrounded by noisy, affectionate relatives. Compared to that, Evan's story felt unbearably cold. That sounds more like a parade than a hospital visit, she remarked, a touch of irony in her tone. This time, Evan actually laughed, and it sounded genuine. Exactly. A parade. And I'm the wax figure they all pretend to care about. His eyes grew distant. Last night, I lay here staring at the ceiling, wishing someone would just come in and sit down. No papers, no talk of money, no demands, just to listen. I thought it would only ever happen in dreams. The room grew quiet again. Nellie could hear the slight catch in his voice, though he tried to mask it with composure. She leaned back in the chair, arms folded, meeting his eyes. Well then, your wish just came true. Except instead of an angel, fate sent you a girl who walked into the wrong room. Something flickered in Evan's gaze. He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. Fate does have a strange sense of humor. Good. That makes us a match. Nellie shrugged, her lips curling into a half-smile. I specialize in surprising people with wrong place, right time visits. Her joke lightened the air. Evan's shoulders eased, his expression less guarded. After a pause, Nellie tilted her head. Don't you have close friends? Evan hesitated. I do. But in my world, friends and business partners tend to blur together. When I'm strong, they show up to share profits. Now that I'm here, they come to make sure I won't step away from my position. None of them stay simply because I'm Evan, just a regular man. Nellie listened, her chest tightening. The man before her had everything most people dreamed of: wealth, power, status. Yet what he lacked was cruelly simple: someone who truly cared. She rested her chin on her hand and spoke slowly. You know, my grandmother always says, the richest person is the one who never has to eat alone. Evan looked at her surprised. That's a good line. She has plenty more. I can tell you, if you're willing to listen. I've got all night, he replied, his voice noticeably softer now. Nellie chuckled and stood up. Well, I don't. I need to get to my real grandmother's room. You know, one mistaken visit is enough for her to retell for the next 10 years. Evan tilted his head, a glimmer of regret in his eyes. You'll come back, won't you? The question slipped out, no longer from a composed CEO, but from a man clinging to hope. Nellie froze. Her heart gave a faint ache, but she didn't let it show. She simply smiled, her eyes warm and bright. If you promise not to make me sign a contract, then maybe I will. Evan studied her, then slowly nodded. I promise. She nodded back, turning toward the door. With her hand on the knob, she looked over her shoulder, teasing yet sincere. You know, sometimes wishes come true, just because a woman got lost. Evan stared after her. The door closed, leaving the room as quiet as before. Yet his heart no longer felt completely empty. For the first time in weeks, Evan Cole had something to look forward to. The next day, after bringing Grandma Elisa some yogurt and reminding her not to move around too much, Nellie hesitated in front of room 570. She wondered if she was being too forward. After all, the man inside was still a complete stranger. She didn't even fully understand why he had wanted her to come back. But those eyes from last night, eyes that carried both pride and a quiet longing for something simple, they wouldn't let her walk away. She knocked softly. Come in. His deep voice came immediately, as if he had been waiting. Nellie pushed the door open. Evan was sitting against the pillows, a magazine in hand. When he saw her, his eyes lit up, though his voice remained casual. I thought you'd break your promise. Nellie set her bag down on the chair, arms crossed. If you doubt me again, next time I'll start charging for visits. He laughed, a real laugh this time, not forced. I can pay, but honestly, I've never hired anyone just to come and talk. Then consider today a free trial service. Nellie sat down, propping her elbow on the armrest. But fair warning, I talk a lot. I've got all day, Evan replied, half serious, half teasing. Nellie smiled and launched into stories from her everyday life. How yesterday's meeting had dragged on for 2 extra hours because her boss liked to inspire everyone by reading his own emails out loud, or how her downstairs neighbor cooked dinner while singing karaoke, making the whole building feel like a concert hall. At first, Evan only smiled, but soon bursts of genuine laughter broke out of him, softening even the bruises at the corner of his mouth. You know, Nellie lowered her voice as if about to reveal a state secret, I'm famous at work for my talent of turning computers into coffee pools. Evan raised a brow, lips twitching. Meaning? Meaning whenever I'm stressed, the probability of me spilling coffee on my keyboard triples. It even put my picture on their office door with the caption, Public Enemy #1 of keyboards. Evan burst into loud laughter, the sound filling the quiet hospital room. If you were the CEO of my company, the shareholders would have heart attacks daily. So basically, you're inviting me in to dissolve your board of directors. Nellie leaned her chin on her hand, eyes sparkling with mischief. Not a bad idea. Maybe your company will turn into a factory producing keyboard wipes. They looked at each other and laughed again. Their laughter echoed in the room, a space far too used to silence and the hum of machines. When the laughter subsided, Evan tilted his head. Strange. I never thought a story about drowning keyboards could make me feel this light. That's my special skill, turning tech tragedies into life comedies, Nellie said proudly. What about you? Besides signing million-dollar contracts, do you have any fun hobbies? Evan spoke slowly. I play chess. Chess? Nellie pretended to be shocked. Ah, that explains why you always look at people like you're calculating their next move. Do I really? Absolutely. Nellie nodded firmly. Even now, I bet you're thinking, if I say the wrong thing, this girl will checkmate me. Evan froze for a moment, then laughed again. You really are a formidable opponent. I'm the opposite, Nellie shrugged. I usually lose right at the opening. I always forget the knight moves in an L. In my head, it prefers moving in an S, for artistic flair. They both cracked up again. The conversation flowed on. Nellie told him about her cat, Confusion, a little menace who once chewed through her laptop charger, forcing her to convince her boss that an electromagnetic storm had taken place. Evan listened intently, his eyes following her every animated expression. He didn't talk much, but whenever he did, his comments were sharp, turning the exchange into a witty back and forth. You should be careful, Evan said in mock seriousness. I've heard cats often resemble their owners. Then I must be a walking disaster too? Nellie laughed. That's fine. At least I clean up after myself, unlike Confusion. Maybe, but I think I'm starting to like this kind of disaster. The words slipped out unexpectedly, freezing the air. Evan looked at her quickly, as if afraid she'd take it the wrong way. But Nellie only raised an eyebrow, her smile clever yet soft. If that's a compliment, I'll take it. But remember, this disaster comes with a no-return policy. Evan chuckled again, his eyes gentler than before. Time passed quickly. When Nellie finally glanced at the clock, nearly an hour had flown by. She stood picking up her bag. I should go. My grandma's waiting to watch her cooking show. If I'm late, she'll scold me for letting her stew burn. Evan nodded, but his voice slowed. You'll come back, won't you? Nellie looked at him. In his eyes, she saw something both fragile and genuine, so unlike the strong, untouchable image of a man like him. She smiled, intelligent yet tender. I think I will, but only if you promise next time to tell me a funny story instead of making me pity you. I promise, Evan said, his gaze never leaving hers. Nellie nodded, then walked out. As the door closed, Evan leaned back against the pillow, a faint smile still lingering on his lips. Inside him, something unfamiliar stirred, like a cold, dark room had just been lit by a small ray of sunlight. The next day, Nellie no longer had a good reason to return to the hospital. Grandma Elisa had already been discharged, now sitting comfortably at home, sipping tea and directing her granddaughter to buy a few pots of chrysanthemums to decorate the balcony. And yet, while standing in a small bookstore near her office, Nellie's eyes paused at the science fiction shelf. She suddenly remembered the way Evan's eyes had lit up when that genre was mentioned. Almost without thinking, her hand pulled out two books, one by Isaac Asimov and another a modern novel Evan had spoken of the day before. She chuckled to herself. What am I doing? Bringing books to a man I've only just met? But then she thought, if it makes him smile, maybe it's worth it. That afternoon, Nellie walked into the hospital. This time she didn't bother with the excuse of visiting her grandmother. She told herself she'd just drop off the books, 5 minutes, then leave. But deep down, she knew the truth. She wanted to see yesterday's smile again. When the door to room 570 opened, Evan looked up. A thick stack of documents rested in his hands, his expression serious at first, but the moment he saw Nellie, his face softened instantly. I thought you wouldn't come back, he said quietly. So did I, Nellie admitted with a shrug. But then I saw these two books and thought, if you're stuck here for a month, you'll probably go insane without something to read. She placed the books on the table beside his bed. Evan stared at them, then looked up, his expression like a child surprised with an unexpected Christmas gift. You remembered what I said yesterday? Of course, Nellie smiled lightly. My memory only fails me when it comes to deadlines. Evan picked up one of the books and flipped through a few pages. His long fingers, still marked with faint scratches, brushed across the paper as if it were something precious. His eyes shone brighter than Nellie had ever seen. Thank you, he said, voice low but sincere. No one's ever brought me something that felt this fitting. Nellie almost cracked a joke to break the mood, but then she caught the genuine gratitude in his gaze. Flustered, she sat down in the chair beside him. Actually, Evan began, setting the book aside. I used to read books like this when I was a kid. My mother often bought them for me. She said if the real world was too cold, I should find warmth in imaginary ones. His voice softened. But she passed away early. After that, no one cared what I liked to read. All they cared about was what I'd study, how I'd inherit the company. Nellie stayed quiet. She didn't interrupt, just gave a small nod, her eyes full of sympathy. After a moment, she spoke. I grew up with my grandmother. My mom worked 2 jobs to raise me. My dad, he left when I was 6. Grandma was both my mother and grandmother. She told me stories, all kinds, from fairy tales to little sayings I still remember today. She smiled gently. Once I asked her, Grandma, why do people laugh at my silly stories? She said, if no one laughs, that's when you should worry. If you can make people laugh, it means you've already given them joy. Evan watched her quietly. She didn't dramatize or sound bitter. Her voice was calm, light, yet radiant. He suddenly realized that beneath Nellie's humor and playfulness was a rare, steady warmth. Your grandmother was wise, Evan murmured. She's the one who taught me that loss isn't always bad. It teaches us to value what remains. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. But the silence wasn't awkward. It felt like a deep breath, enough for both to sense a new connection. Nellie suddenly stood and walked to the window. She pulled the curtain aside, gazing at the city lights flickering to life. Do you ever think those lights are like untold stories? Every home, every window, its own story. Evan looked surprised. I've never thought of it that way. Then try it, Nellie said, turning back, her eyes sparkling. Somewhere out there, maybe someone's staring at these same lights, wishing for someone to step into their life, just to sit down and listen. Evan studied her for a long moment. Then for the first time, he gave a small nod, as though accepting a truth he'd never considered. You are nothing like anyone I've ever met, he said slowly. Good or bad? Nellie narrowed her eyes. So good. I can't even put it into words. She laughed, but this time not to break the moment, rather to soften it. You'd better keep that book then. I'll come back once you finish it to test if you understood it. That challenge is harder than signing a $1 billion deal, Evan said. the corner of his mouth lifting into a rare smile. Perfect. At least once you'll be doing something not for money, Nellie shot back, eyes gleaming with mischief. Evan chuckled, but behind that laugh, he felt it clearly. This girl wasn't just bringing laughter. She was reminding him of a time when someone truly cared, when advice was simple, when being with someone didn't require walls. As Nellie rose to leave, he suddenly called out, "Nellie, what is it?" She turned, hand on the doorknob. Evan looked at her, hesitating a moment before speaking softly. "Thank you for bringing the little things that somehow feel so big." Nellie froze for a moment, then smiled. "It's the little things that keep us alive, Evan. Just remember that." The door closed, but this time Evan's heart no longer felt empty. Instead, he was left with a new book, a new reminder, and a smile he knew he would be waiting to see again. In the days that followed, Nellie's routine underwent a quiet change. In the mornings, she went to work. At lunch, she grabbed a quick salad. In the late afternoon, she stopped by the little flower shop on the corner for a bouquet of white daisies or lavender, before heading to the hospital on her way home. There was no need for an appointment. By then, Evan was already used to the sound of her knock. 2 taps, then 1, a special rhythm Nellie invented. "So I don't walk into the wrong room again." The nurses began to notice her. One teased, "Girlfriend?" Nellie only smiled lightly. "A very dedicated visitor." Evan overheard and arched a brow. Dedicated enough to turn this hospital room into a library and a movie theater. She shot back coolly. "Depends on whether the patient behaves." They created little rituals. Nellie would open the window a few inches to let in the evening sun, change the water in the vase, and stick a wooden coffee stirrer inside. So the flowers have a friend to tell stories to. Evan would stack his documents and bow to them like an old actor leaving the stage. "Perhaps we won't be needing each other tonight." She would neatly coil the charger so it didn't touch the bed frame. Technology shouldn't stumble because of carelessness. These tiny gestures side by side became something warm and unexplainably comforting. One afternoon, Nellie brought her laptop. "Movie night," she announced, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "Something light, with romance, with the city at night, and good music." "You're really serious about music," Evan teased. "Love can wait, but my ears can't." They picked a classic romance film. The screen glowed, blue light reflected in Evan's brown eyes and the curve of Nellie's lips. The hospital speakers crackled at first, so she fiddled with the settings. "See? Survival skills, clearing trash, clearing cash, and clearing doubts." Evan chuckled. "Add clearing me out of my reports." They watched, making quiet comments. Sometimes Nellie paused a frame. "See this shot? The city in the distance is blurry like a memory, but the lamp in the foreground glows like something unsaid." Evan nodded thoughtfully, perhaps watching a film for the first time with his heart open instead of his business mind. Near the end, just as the leads were about to kiss in the rain, the stream froze. Their lips hovered a breath apart, the loading circles spinning endlessly. Evan glanced at her with a mischievous look. "Should we try it for real?" Nellie, unflinching, tapped his hand lightly. "No, I only like the original version, not pirated copies." Her quick retort made him laugh out loud, the sound shaking the vase of daisies. "All right," Nellie muttered. "Time to appease the Wi-Fi gods." She switched to her phone's data. "If the bill spikes, you're paying." Evan, mock serious. "Send me the invoice. I'll pay with a story from my life." "Nice try." She closed her eyes for a beat. "But make sure that story has a twist." That day's twist was Evan telling her how, at 10 years old, he had hidden inside a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf, devouring 3 sci-fi novels straight to drown out the sound of his parents' arguments. "The sound of breaking dishes has its own orbit," he said. "Sometimes straight, sometimes curved, sometimes spiraling." Nellie didn't interrupt. She only rested her hand on the bed rail, close to his long, scarred fingers, now healing. "And you learned to listen to the sound of words instead of shattering glass," she said softly. Another day, they didn't watch a movie. Nellie brought a travel chess set. "I'm terrible at chess," she admitted, "but I like how the board makes 2 people really look at each other." Evan set the pieces easily with one hand, the other still bandaged. "Impressive," Nellie nodded. I guess your one-handed contract signing is on point too. When necessary, he replied, but not now. They played. Nellie deliberately opened with a wrong move to see if he'd catch it. The knight moves in an L, Evan smiled. You're sending it in an N. N for nowhere but here, she winked. A place where you don't need to follow the rules to have fun. Evan countered, capturing a bishop, then paused. You make people want to break more rules than they thought possible. Only the ones that don't hurt anyone, Nellie answered. On another afternoon, she brought a tiny Bluetooth speaker. Music, she declared, is how you soften the glare of hospital lights. She played a gentle jazz playlist, the saxophone smooth as silk, the piano like footsteps across wooden floors. Evan leaned back, sometimes closing his eyes, sometimes watching her fingers tap the rhythm on the bedrail. The only thing I've ever beaten in life, Nellie teased, is rhythm. I won't compete, Evan said, because I'd definitely lose. Gradually, room 570 became their meeting place. Occasionally, Evan's assistant came by with documents, only to nod politely at Nellie and retreat. Go ahead with your work. I'll step out, she offered. Evan shook his head. Later. When the door closed, Nellie half joked, half serious. Aren't you afraid people will say I'm distracting you? I'm focusing on exactly what I should be, he answered calmly. So calm it left her flustered for a rare moment. Some days Evan practiced walking the hallway with a nurse. Nellie walked beside him, not holding his hand, just close enough so it would be there if he needed it. 1, 2, stop, breathe, she coached. Don't try to look strong. You're allowed to be weak when you're a patient. Evan looked down, then up at her. And if I fall, then I'll catch you, Nellie replied instantly, like a reflex. Then she smiled. And if I can't, I'll call the whole hallway over. You're never just one person. That last line echoed in his mind long into the night. One evening, rain misted against the window. Nellie told him about how Grandma Elisa grew a beetle plant from a single leaf. She said, Nellie's voice mixed like brewing tea, everything begins with something very small. A leaf, a question, a knock on the door. Evan asked, and you? What small thing did you start from? A nod, Nellie answered. When you told me to stay. They sat in silence for a long time. The rain tapped softly and hallway lights streaked yellow across the floor. Nellie checked her watch. I need to go. Tomorrow I have a presentation. If I mess it up, it'll be your fault for making me addicted to movies. Evan straightened, as if to make the parting easier. If you mess up, call me. I'll clap loud enough to drown the criticism. No need, Nellie said, grabbing her bag. I've got pride, you know. At the door, she suddenly turned, tilting her head. Got anything you want to say? Like a movie's last line, right before the credits roll. Evan thought for a moment. Nothing good enough yet. Then keep it, she smiled. The best lines usually come late. Their bond grew brick by brick. A song, a page of a book, a chess move, a perfectly timed joke. No grand promises, but every evening, when he heard her two knock then one rhythm, Evan straightened his pillow, smoothed his blanket, like a boy tidying his room before a friend came over. Once, Nellie brought a box of butter cookies she had baked herself. I thought you only baked comebacks, Evan said, taking a bite. Both, she replied, but don't confuse them. Cookies are crisp, answers are soft. He tasted, then nodded. Soft, dangerous, dangerous. Because people want more, he said quietly, eyes fixed on her. Nellie leaned on the chair, replying lightly, then save one for next time. Sometimes she talked about work. No coffee floods today, she reported, but I did turn a tense meeting into a breathable brainstorm. How? By asking the one question no one dared. What are we even trying to do, other than prove we're right? Evan laughed, though his eyes deepened. If you joined my board meetings, people would probably talk half as much. And listen twice as much, Nellie added. That's the real profit. At night when Nellie left, Evan was left with a fading song, a half-read book, and the scent of lavender. Among those, the one certainty was knowing that someone would return. His loneliness didn't vanish, but it shifted aside, making space for something new. Like the last rays of daylight, still warm even after the sun had gone. Sometimes he tried writing, not reports, not emails, but clumsy fragments of prose. A person knocked, he wrote. Not a doctor, not an assistant. She knocked twice, then once. And in the silence between those knocks, I heard a story I may have wanted to tell all along. That night before bed, Nellie received a short message. Today's movie, the original version. She stared at the screen and smiled, without replying. No words were needed. Tomorrow, when she knocked in that familiar rhythm, the answer would be there in both their eyes. A smile ripened with anticipation, like fruit hanging in the window of room 570, sweet to the touch. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the long hospital windows, laying a thin golden ribbon across the hallway. Nellie arrived with her familiar knock, 2 taps, then 1. Evan was already sitting up, a brace strapped across his shoulder, soft-soled training shoes on his feet. Beside him stood a walker borrowed from physical therapy. Today I want to try walking farther, he said. His voice was calm, but Nellie caught a trace of pride mixed with nerves. Safety rules. She held up 3 fingers, a mock serious yet playful expression on her face. Green light means go. Yellow light means slow down and rest. Red light means sit immediately. No need to prove anything. And green light with glitter? Evan arched a brow. That's the reward. One story I haven't told yet. He smiled in defeat. A nurse strapped a heart rate monitor to his wrist, gave a few quick instructions, then stepped back. Nellie walked at his right side, never touching him. She kept her promise from the very beginning. I'll walk beside you. If you need me, I'll be here. The first steps were careful, like treading on water. Evan's grip tightened slightly on the walker, his eyes fixed ahead. Muscles tensed and released beneath the thin fabric of his shirt. Nellie fell into step, matching his pace, her breathing steady as background music. The corridor was quiet, save for the distant squeak of a cart and the sharp smell of antiseptic. 1, 2. She counted softly, steady. Green light. They passed the first corner. On the wall hung a black and white photo of the city rooftops, shingles laid like fish scales. Evan glanced at it, and the moment his eyes left the floor, his heel faltered. The walker tipped slightly. For a heartbeat-long eternity, his body swayed. Nellie's hand was there, not jerking, just pressing gently at his elbow, steadying him back onto solid ground. Yellow light, she murmured. Pause here. Evan stilled, feeling the weight return to his knees. The monitor beeped once as his heart rate spiked. He exhaled, half laughing at himself. Almost fell. Almost, Nellie repeated calmly. But you didn't. And even if you had, there's always a backup team. 2 hands. Her fingers slipped away. Not too slow, not too fast. Evan stared straight ahead, and slowly, something in his gaze shifted, like fog wiped from glass. I'm afraid... His voice carried no hint of an ironic smile this time. I'm afraid no one will be there to reach out. The words fell heavily, not dramatically, but weighed. Nellie paused. Then she tilted her head, placing her response exactly where it belonged. But now you have me. She stopped, the corners of her lips curving, not to tease but to affirm. And you'd better get used to it. The air changed. The fluorescent lights still glared. The hall still smelled of alcohol. But her words lit something else, an unnamed glow. Evan looked at her longer than usual. Then he nodded, small but certain. Green light? He asked. Green light, Nellie answered. They moved on. This time, Evan didn't look at the photo again. They counted steps, passing blue plastic chairs and a vending machine that blinked with LED lights. At the far window, Nellie touched the frame, signaling yellow light. Reward, she said, reaching into her jacket pocket. Where's the glitter? Evan teased, his breath steadier now. The glitter is the twist. Nellie leaned against the wall, gazing outside. My grandma once begged a neighbor for a small vine cutting. Just 3 leaves. Everyone said it wouldn't live. She planted it in an empty milk tin and talked to it every day. A month later, 2 new leaves sprouted, then it clung to a thread she strung, then climbed the window ledge. 3 years later, the whole balcony was green. The glitter was... No one believed it would grow, except the one who cared for it. Evan listened as if to music. He watched the sunlight stripe the tiles, then glanced at her hand, the same hand that steadied him when the walker tipped. So you think I'm that vine? I think, she considered, everyone is a lone leaf sometimes. Some just need a ledge to cling to. Some need someone patient enough to keep talking to them. He chuckled softly. So basically, I need daily stories. Who doesn't? Nellie shrugged. The only difference is whether people admit it. They rested 2 minutes, then turned back. This time, Evan lifted his legs higher, his pace even and steady. At the end of the hall, the nurse gave him a thumbs up. The monitor beeped back into the green zone. Green light, Nellie thought, smiling. Today's record, past the vending machine, she announced solemnly, as if reporting a sprint. Tomorrow's goal, the potted palm. Charming checkpoint, Evan smirked. Is there a prize? Of course. She pulled out a yellow sticky note with a crooked medal sketched on it. Hallway Obstacle Champion, 5th floor edition. Limited edition, one of a kind. He took it carefully as if it were a fragile treasure. I'll frame it. Don't. Nellie shook her head. Just pin it to your heart. Evan laughed quietly, this time not sharp, but low, settled in his chest. Back in his room, he lowered himself onto the bed. His shoulders finally relaxed. Nellie poured warm water into a paper cup and slid it toward him. She didn't ask, does it hurt? She'd learned some questions only made people remember pain. Instead, she asked, what did you learn today? Evan thought, glancing at the reflection in the glass. A man in patient clothes and a woman in a thin jacket, standing slightly angled, her eyes bright. That almost falling isn't falling, he said. And if I do fall, there will be a hand. Nellie nodded like a teacher checking the right answer. Good. Almost perfect score. Almost? He teased. Perfect is when you say that to yourself, without me reminding you. He fell silent, then smiled, lips pressed together. For a moment, quiet stretched between them, not for lack of words, but because everything needed had already been said. Nellie pulled a mint candy from her pocket and placed it on the table. Anti-gloom medicine, mint-flavored. Evan looked at it and for the first time smiled like a 17-year-old boy. Nellie, he called just as she was about to rise. Why do you keep coming back? She didn't dodge, didn't deflect with a joke. She answered as if laying one more brick on a wall being rebuilt. Because I want to. Not out of pity, not out of curiosity. I want to be here, right when you need someone, for no reason at all. The monitor beeped a little faster. Nellie glanced at the screen and arched a brow. See? Even the machine loves drama. Evan laughed, shaking his head. You'll come tomorrow? He asked. If you promise me one thing. She folded her arms in a mock, stern expression. What thing? Promise that next time you almost fall, you'll remember what it felt like to have a hand at your elbow, and you won't be ashamed of needing it. Evan looked at her, this time no hesitation. I promise. Before leaving, Nellie straightened the lavender stems in the vase, propping up the drooping ones with a coffee stir stick. She pulled the curtain, leaving just a strip of light. At the door, she touched the edge of the bed, where he had sat down by himself earlier, unaided. Green light, Evan, she whispered with a smile. See you tomorrow. The door closed. Alone in the room, Evan slipped off the wrist monitor. The last reading still flickered faintly, like the glitter Nellie had promised. He smoothed the sticky note and opened his notebook, writing one simple line beneath today's date. There was a hand. That night he fell asleep early. Not from fatigue, but because, for the first time, sleep came like a warm blanket pulled gently over his shoulders, woven from footsteps, stories, a mint candy, and the promise that he would have to get used to not being alone. Loving this story? This story belongs to Soul Stories. If you see it anywhere else, please come back to our official channel to enjoy it in full. That morning, the hospital gleamed brighter than usual. Sunlight poured down the spotless white corridors, reflecting off polished glass walls. Evan was informed by his doctor that he was fit to be discharged. His major injuries had healed, his condition was stable, and all he needed now was to continue physical therapy for a while. Nellie arrived as usual, carrying a small bouquet. She thought she was simply there to see a new friend off, to congratulate him on returning to his own successful life. In her mind, Evan was a well-off, accomplished man with some status. How much she had never asked nor cared. When she stepped into the room, she found him folding the hospital clothes neatly, his movements slow but decisive. Beside him sat a high-end leather suitcase, clearly delivered by someone else. The big day, Nellie smiled, setting the bouquet on the table. Goodbye to white walls, welcome back to the world out there. If it weren't for you, these walls would have swallowed me whole, Evan replied, his voice low but sincere. The words made her hesitate, but before she could respond, his phone rang. His assistant was calling to confirm that the car was waiting at the main entrance. Evan nodded, then turned to her. Come with me. They stepped into the hallway. At first it was ordinary, nurses nodding, a doctor smiling, and congratulating him on his recovery. But as they neared the main lobby, the atmosphere shifted. From a distance, Nellie heard the clicks of cameras and the buzz of voices. When they exited the elevator, the scene froze her in her tracks. A line of luxury cars stretched outside, sleek black limousines with an SUV following as escort. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras aimed at the hospital doors. They called out in unison, Evan Cole. Mr. Cole, when will you return to the company? Mr. Cole, will you press charges against the one who caused the accident? Nellie's eyes widened, her body stiff. She turned to look at Evan. He showed no surprise, only straightened his shoulders, his face tightening for a second before settling back into composure. Instantly, several men in black suits, assistants, bodyguards, surrounded him, shielding and guiding him forward. One bent slightly and spoke quickly. The car is ready, Mr. Cole. The press has been instructed to keep their distance. Her heart pounded at the sound of Mr. Cole. Shards of memory rushed back. A business magazine cover showing a young man standing at an international summit stage. A Forbes article mentioning Evan Cole, self-made billionaire who built a cybersecurity empire. Nellie's mind reeled. He wasn't just successful or wealthy, as she had guessed. He was that man, one of the most prominent names in the world, a billionaire chased by the media. She stood frozen. Evan immediately noticed the shock in her eyes. As the reporters shouted his name, he turned and clasped her hand firmly. Nellie. His voice was deep, urgent amid the chaos. I'm still the man you met in that hospital room. The one who reads books, laughs at coffee spills, and fears almost falling. Don't look at me the way they do. Nellie swallowed hard, her mind a whirl. She whispered, flustered but honest, I knew you had money, but I didn't know that Forbes covered you. He squeezed her hand gently, his gaze so earnest it cut through the relentless clicks of cameras. You're the only one who makes me forget how much money I have. The only one who dares to argue, to joke, to see me as a man, not a headline. I need you to keep that for me. Nellie stood amidst the storm of press, breathless and overwhelmed, but the warmth of his grip, the raw plea in his eyes steadied her. She drew in a deep breath, then gave a small nod. All right, but you'll have to get used to the fact that I'll never stay quiet like all the others. The corner of Evan's lips curved into a faint smile, warm, tinged with sadness. He nodded, and so, beneath the flashing cameras, they walked forward together. A world of opulence and noise waited just outside. But in that moment, Nellie realized, it wasn't the limousine or the bodyguards that made her heart race. It was his hand, the same hand that had once nearly lost its balance, now holding hers with unwavering trust. That afternoon, after leaving the hospital, Evan invited Nellie out for a meal, saying it was to thank her. He let Nellie decide, and she led him down a familiar street, stopping in front of a little cafe tucked beneath the shade of an old almond tree. Its wooden sign was worn, and golden light spilled through the glass windows. The soft strum of an acoustic guitar drifted out. Evan paused, slightly surprised. Here? Yeah, Nellie smiled. I hate fancy places. The coffee here is good and the price is cheaper than one of your shirts. He chuckled and followed her inside. The cafe wasn't crowded. A few students studied from their notebooks, an elderly couple shared tea, and a young waitress wiped down the tables. Nellie chose a wooden table by the window. Evan sat down feeling both unfamiliar and at ease. No one stared at him like he was someone important. No whispers about his fortune. To them, he was just another customer. "What do you want to drink?" Nellie asked, her eyes glimmering. "Whatever you usually order," he replied. "Dangerous choice," she teased. "I'm famous for ordering drinks just to look at them, not to drink them." "Then I'll drink them for you." They both laughed. The waitress brought out 2 cappuccinos. Nellie used her spoon to draw a lopsided heart in the foam, then tilted her chin at him. "Well, that heart looks like it needs emergency care," Evan said, laughing, more freely than he had in a long time. "It's just a trial version," she winked. "I've never been good at making things perfect. But sometimes imperfection feels more real." Evan stared at her for a few seconds. That simple line struck something deep inside him. He nodded gently. "I'd forgotten what it felt like, for imperfection to be okay." Nellie began sharing little everyday stories. "At the office today, everyone fought over the printer. In the end, I created a schedule. Whoever was late had to buy pastries. By the end of the day, we had 3 batches of sweets to share." Evan laughed aloud. The image of a stern boardroom clashed hilariously with the thought of coworkers competing for a printer to win desserts. "And my grandma," Nellie went on, "every morning she goes to the park for Tai Chi, but she never does it quietly. She turns the session into a market gathering. 1, 2, 3, and next week someone bring baked buns." Evan listened, his eyes softening. Small, trivial stories, but they eased something inside him. "You know," he said quietly, "for the first time I feel ordinary. Just a man in the city, not a name on a magazine cover." Nellie sipped her coffee, tilting her head. "So being ordinary is a luxury for you?" He chuckled, nodding. "Maybe it is." They sat in silence for a while, the soft guitar playing through a small speaker, the breeze rustling outside. Evan felt something strange in his chest, light, warm, free of calculation. "I used to think," he said slowly, "that once I left the hospital, I'd have to go straight back to meetings, projects, strategies. But sitting here with you, I realize some moments are worth more than 100 contracts." Nellie looked at him, her gaze clear and bright. She didn't reply, just smiled. And that smile told him enough. Maybe, just maybe, he had found a place to return to. When they left the cafe, the street lamps cast golden light across the cobblestone path. Nellie walked beside him, hands tucked in her jacket pockets, her hair fluttering in the evening breeze. Almost without thinking, Evan reached out and took her hand. She flinched slightly, then gently squeezed back. In that moment, there were no flashing cameras, no curious stares, just 2 people, ordinary and quiet, walking side by side beneath the yellow streetlights. And for the first time in years, Evan Cole felt truly happy. Grandma Elisa's apartment sat in an old red brick building, its wooden staircase creaking with every step. When Nellie opened the door, Evan hesitated for a moment. The faint scent of apple pie drifted out. Golden light spilled from the small kitchen, and everything inside felt like the opposite of the lavish world he was used to. The oak table was covered with a simple checkered cloth. On it, Grandma Lisa had already laid out a steaming pot of chicken soup, a colorful salad, toasted bread, and a warm apple pie glistening with butter. "Come in," Grandma Lisa smiled. "There are no rules here." Evan gave a small nod and pulled out a chair. At that moment, Confusion, the fluffy cat, leapt onto the seat beside him, nearly knocking a spoon into the salad bowl. "Oh, not again!" Nellie exclaimed, rushing to scoop the cat away. Evan only chuckled, picking up the fallen spoon and setting it neatly back in place. "It's fine. My company is usually more chaotic than this." Grandma Elisa raised an eyebrow at the sight. "If you can handle this cat, then maybe you can handle my granddaughter." Nellie blushed scarlet while Evan laughed and nodded in agreement. Dinner unfolded with the gentle clink of cutlery. Evan lifted a spoonful of soup, the steam of chicken and celery carrying him back to a distant childhood. The bread was crisp, the salad fresh and bright, ordinary yet surprisingly good. "This is delicious," he admitted sincerely. "Just an everyday meal," Grandma Elisa replied simply, adding more salad onto his plate. "Eat up." Evan fell quiet for a moment. He was accustomed to dinners with elaborate menus, but never before had anyone served him an extra scoop of soup or added more vegetables to his plate like this. As they ate, Nellie shared little stories from her day, and Grandma Elisa occasionally chimed in with witty remarks. Yesterday at Tai Chi, my friend said chicken soup is good for the heart, so I cooked it today. Tell me if it works. Evan nodded. My heart already feels stronger. Nellie shot him a mock glare, but all three burst out laughing. When dessert came, Grandma Elisa brought out the apple pie, cutting it into neat squares. The scent of cinnamon filled the kitchen. Evan took a bite, just sweet enough, warm all the way to his chest. This is the best apple pie I've ever had, he said truthfully. If you're free, stop by again, Grandma Elisa replied, her tone calm, as if she was already used to having guests at her table. Evan froze slightly. It wasn't a grand invitation or a heavy-handed phrase, just a simple line, but in his chest, it rang like a welcome he hadn't heard in years. After dinner, the three of them sat around the table with cups of chamomile tea. Outside the window, the city lights sparkled. Confusion curled up asleep on a chair. Evan leaned back, watching the grandmother and granddaughter laugh together. Their voices filled the small apartment, a peace warmer than any music he had ever heard at lavish parties. He spoke softly, almost to himself. Thank you for giving me an evening like this. Nellie turned to him, a little surprised, but seeing the genuine emotion in his eyes, she only smiled in reply. When Evan left, Grandma Elisa walked him to the door. The night breeze swept through the hallway. She simply placed a hand on his shoulder and said, Take care. If you're free, come for dinner again. Evan bowed his head, a rare smile spreading across his lips. That night, sitting in his luxurious apartment, her simple words still echoed in his mind. For the first time in years, Evan felt that someone was waiting for him somewhere. And he knew that place wasn't a grand boardroom, but a small kitchen lit with warm yellow light, the smell of apple pie, and a girl who made him believe that being ordinary could be the happiest thing of all. In the days after dinner at Grandma Elisa's, the press closed in. Headlines splashed across front pages. Billionaire Evan Cole, an office girl, a real-life Cinderella. Photos of them grocery shopping, sitting in a cafe, and even Evan holding confusion in the small apartment appeared online. Social media buzzed, some praising a fairy tale romance, others sneering it was gold digging. Nellie read the words, her heart sinking. At the office, co-workers whispered behind her back. That evening, when Evan came to pick her up, reporters swarmed around her. Flashes exploded. Evan, is this really your girlfriend? Who is she? Is she using you? Nellie froze, panicked, ready to step back. But Evan caught her hand, pulling her firmly to his side. His voice rang out, steady. No comment. He ushered her into the car and sped off through the blinding lights. Inside, Nellie trembled. I can't take this anymore. They treat me like a joke. I don't want my grandma dragged into this. And I don't want you losing your reputation because of me. Maybe I should stop. Evan turned to her, tension in his eyes. Don't say that, Nellie. The phone rang, cutting him off. His assistant's voice came through. His father, Richard Cole, was waiting at the estate. The living room was vast, with crystal chandeliers casting a cold glow. Richard set the newspaper down on the table, his voice sharp as glass. Are you trying to turn this family into a circus? This is my private life, Evan replied evenly. Private? Richard scoffed. You're the face of this corporation. That girl is ordinary beneath you. End it now. From the doorway, Nellie stood frozen, hearing every word. Her heart clenched. Evan drew a deep breath, his tone resolute. You've never once asked me if I'm happy. I am, with Nellie. Richard's voice hardened. You'll lose the respect of the entire world. Evan met his father's eyes. If that's the price, I'll pay it. I choose her. Shaken, Nellie turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Evan followed, catching her hand in the garden. I can't let you sacrifice everything for me, she cried. I'm just a normal girl. It's because you're normal that I feel human again, Evan said fiercely, holding her tight. I've had everything. But only with you do I have a home. At that moment, the gate swung open. Reporters who had been waiting rushed forward, microphones and cameras raised. Evan, do you really love her? Your father objects. Will you end this? Evan pulled Nellie into his arms, shielding her, eyes fixed firmly on the cameras. Yes, I love her. She doesn't want my money. She gives me what no one can buy, peace and a family. The crowd fell silent for a beat. Nellie lifted her gaze, and in his eyes she saw nothing but certainty. From a distance, Richard's face was rigid, but he said nothing. Nellie whispered, trembling, "Evan." He bent close, murmuring against her ear, defying every watching eye. "No one will take you from me. Not my father, not the press, no one." And in that moment, amid the storm, Evan Cole was no longer the cold billionaire. He was simply a man standing tall to protect the woman he loved. After that chaotic night, Nellie thought Evan would pull away. She braced herself for a cold text, an apologetic explanation that sounded like, "I'm sorry, I can't." But instead, the very next afternoon came the familiar knock at her door. When she opened it, Evan stood there, holding a bouquet of white tulips, dressed in a simple shirt. His eyes were no longer tense like the night before, but clear and steady. "I came for dinner," he said firmly. "Your grandmother told me, if you're free, just stop by. Today I'm free." Nellie blinked, stunned into silence. Before she could reply, Grandma Elisa appeared from the kitchen, apron dusted with flour. "Come in then," she said warmly. "No press here, no noise. Just chicken soup and bread." That evening's meal was as simple as always. Tomato soup, roast meat with mashed potatoes, and a fragrant apple pie. Evan sat down in the old wooden chair by the table, while confusion hopped up again, this time curling into his lap as if declaring, "This spot belongs to me." Grandma Elisa laughed at the sight. "Good. If the cat trusts you, then maybe I can too." Nellie blushed furiously, but Evan only nodded, his eyes glowing with warmth. Throughout the meal, they shared small anecdotes. Grandma Elisa recounted how the neighbor had just renovated her balcony. Nellie told a story about co-workers planning a picnic, and Evan shared a few memories from his student days that few had ever heard. Not once did they mention money, the company, or the press. When dinner was over, the three of them sat together over cups of chamomile tea. Evan set the tulips on the table, then spoke slowly but with certainty. "Last night, in front of the press and my father, I said it clearly. Tonight I want to say it again. Right here, in this kitchen. I choose you, Nellie, and I want your grandmother to know that too." The room grew still. Nellie's heart pounded as she looked at him. Grandma Elisa was silent for a moment, then gave a small smile, placing her hand on the table. "If you've made your choice, then take another slice of pie. Around here, we trust actions more than words." Evan let out a soft laugh, but his eyes glistened. He cut another piece of pie, eating it slowly, as if swallowing the promise he had just made. That night, as Evan prepared to leave, Grandma Elisa walked him to the door. Before closing it, she spoke plainly. "Take care on the road. And remember, don't let my granddaughter face the storms alone." Evan nodded, squeezing Nellie's hand. His gaze was resolute, as if putting an end to every doubt. He wasn't turning away. He had chosen, and he would protect that choice with all his strength. On the ride home, Nellie sat beside him, her heart trembling yet at ease. She whispered, "I never thought a simple dinner could matter so much." Evan turned, taking her hand. "For me, this was the most important dinner of my life, because it had family, and it had you." Under the pale glow of the streetlights, Nellie smiled, knowing that from this moment on, in the middle of every storm outside, they had found a haven of their own. 6 months had passed since the night Evan publicly defended his love in front of his father and the press. Enough time for his wounds to heal completely, for public gossip to cool down, and for the whispers of Cinderella and the billionaire to fade into the background. In business, Evan returned to his usual form. Coal industries thrived, with projects succeeding one after another, forcing shareholders to remain silent about his private life. Richard Cole, though never openly approving, stopped bringing up the matter of breaking up during board meetings. Nellie remained the same simple office girl, but now lived a new balance. Part of her life in Evan's glamorous world, part in the warm apartment with Grandma Lisa. She and Evan found a strange harmony, attending grand events in the morning, then spending the evening at their neighborhood cafe or lying on the couch with a hot pizza box, watching movies together. Clara, the name once tied to rumors and malicious headlines, vanished from the media altogether. Her silence only made Evan and Nellie's relationship stronger. Tonight, Grandma Elisa's small kitchen glowed with candlelight. On the table, alongside chicken soup and salad, stood a bottle of red wine Evan had brought. The famous billionaire, dressed simply in a shirt, was busy slicing an apple pie with Nellie's grandmother. When everything was ready, Grandma Elisa raised her glass, her eyes twinkling with joy. "Here's to the wrong room that brought Nellie to the right man." Laughter filled the kitchen. Evan turned to Nellie, his gaze soft and deep. He leaned closer, whispering in her ear, "That lonely prayer I made that night, it brought you to me." Nellie smiled, mischief dancing in her eyes. "And my clumsy mistake turned out to be the best deal of your life." The table burst into laughter. Evan couldn't help himself. He leaned down and kissed her lips. Sweet, certain, a declaration to the world. This was a love that could never be replaced. Outside the window, the city lights flickered. Inside that little kitchen, they had proven that sometimes a mistake, walking into the wrong hospital room, was in fact the doorway to lasting happiness. This story didn't need to end with a marriage contract or a grand ceremony. It closed with simplicity, a kiss, a home, and a love that had weathered every prejudice. And for Evan, a man who once thought he had everything yet lived in the deepest loneliness, that mistake had become the greatest miracle of his life.